Hey guys, we're going to be going live here in a minute and a half, so comment away. Let's see what you got. Let's see where you're coming from. Hey guys, Terrence here again. 2020, we're back in the new year with another Let's Talk Reef. Happy to have you guys out there. We've got a good crowd already joining us here on this live stream. We've got people from South Florida, Ohio. We've got the Big Apple, Arizona. We've got Mervyn Jones out there who says he's supposed to be getting his Apex Trident from his local fish store next week. Very excited. I'm excited for you out there, Mervyn. Really great show today. We're going to be talking about things in 2020 that Mr. Saltwater Tank liked, and maybe one of mine, and maybe I can actually squeak out of him some things that he didn't like in 2019 and things that he might be looking to hopefully see come about in 2020. So it should be a really good show. Get your questions out there. Talk to us about any of the products that you saw out there that you guys like so we can talk about them and comment on them. Really should be a great show. We're going to talk about, probably have some Neptune talk in here as well, a little bit with Mark, I'm sure. He is a Neptune guy. I've got a couple of surprises for him, too, things I'm going to ask him or point out that maybe he's done or not done quite right in his past related to some of these things. So I hope it's going to be a great show. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We got over 100 people in the live stream. This is awesome to start the new year. Let me go and see if I can bring Mark in here in the correct split screen that's going to have my stuff in it. Mark, how's it going, man?
I'm well, Terrence. Thanks for having me. I'm talking to you from the other end of the country today. I'm out on an install, actually. Just took down a client's tank. He sold it to a guy on Craigslist, of all things, and new hobbyist, and he looked at it all. And my client said, you just got to do this right from the get-go. You should take the whole system, including the Apex. So now there's a new Apex /new/used Apex user out there too. So that should make you happy.
Awesome. It's always happy. It always makes me happy. It makes me super excited to hear about another control freak coming online. So this guy had already a tank, and then he decided he wanted to upsize it and saw one on Craigslist.
So he had a Red Sea 650. And he called me, he wrote me about a couple months ago and said, I'm turning 50 in a year and a half. I want to start planning the dream tank. And then we had some initial conversations. And as he described it today, once he was pretty clear on what size tank he was going to get, all he did was daydream about the new tank. So he said, this is BS. I'm just going to go ahead and get rid of the one that I have because all I think about is the other tank. Right. It's like a relationship. When you know you're leaving, you're breaking up. This goes for guys and girls too. Like, you don't call the person as much. You don't go out with them. It's the same thing.
You have to find something to make it fresh again, right?
Right.
And I know what that's like, too, because when I had a 110-gallon tank, I kept thinking, maybe I get a bigger one, but it's great. The 110 tall is nice or whatever. And all my buddies like, yeah, you might need to go bigger. And then when Nancy said, my wife Nancy goes, we need to have a bigger tank. I was like, oh gosh, I married the right person. Oh, this is just amazing. Yes. So then it's about what are we going to do, right? And we're sitting, we were going out, I can't remember where, and we're sitting at like McDonald's for breakfast somewhere, and I'm going through the KSL ads, which is like Craigslist in Salt Lake, and some guy down in Provo had a 210 complete, right? And it was like $1,000 for everything. And it's like, are we ready to do this to her? And she's like, yeah, let's do it. I'm like, okay, I start making the calls to Dave. Everybody's like, okay, we got to move a tank. It's exciting times, for sure, when that happens, no doubt. So, so Mark, so you're doing a build out there, but you're also busy, obviously producing tons of content as Mr. Saltwater Tank everywhere. You get to go everywhere in the nation. You're usually interviewing guys like me. It's not usually the other way around. Let's talk about 2019. Before we talk about products, were there any surprises for you at all in 2019?
No, there's things that people talked about that would happen in 2019 that I didn't think would ever happen, like Indonesia opening up again.
Right.
I just don't. I mean, it seems like every week it's like next week's the week. I'm like, okay.
Right.
So that didn't happen. I'm a little bit surprised that there's still not a new controller on the market, I have to say.
Maybe it's not that easy.
I mean, it looks easy. You guys make it look easy. How's that? It's got to be
so
easy.
Nice, man. You butter us up so much, man. Everybody thinks you're a complete shill. We'll probably get all sorts of like, Mark is just a Neptune shill. But no, Mark is hard on stuff. He really is. He'll tell you what it is.
I have to wait for my Trident reagents just like everybody else.
I mean, there are people that we won't mention that Mark has mentioned to me that they say, hey, Mark, can you... can you review our product, or can you endorse our product, or what have you? And Mark's like, yeah, let that thing get out there for a while. Let me see what other people say. Let me see what the water's like and test it. So yeah, he's not one to just jump on for anything. So all right, so I think let's do this. Let's hop right into the first one, right? Which I've got down here. What's your first product? Because I know some of these, they're not, well, at least maybe one of them, they're not super spectacular products, right? They're not like, wow, this is the most amazing thing to come to reef keeping, but they definitely have some reasons. So the first product that you have that you want to talk about, what is it?
Let's talk about the heaters on the market, because that's something that's, you got to have them. Nearly everyone needs a heater.
Right.
And they're often a sore spot because some tend to fail. I mean, I went from glass heaters back in the day, even wrote an article about it, about going to titaniums, and then I went to titaniums, and then I had a titanium tube fail, which I just happened to be home. I travel a lot. I just happened to be home and didn't have any losses because I can act quickly. But, Eheim is a brand that's been around forever. You and I have talked about Eheim. I know you run the Jaegers, and now they have the thermocoupled Jaegers, which are nice with the run dry. So it doesn't sit there and just overheat and crack and then break. And
So tell me about it. So, one of the biggest downsides people talk about, I know we've talked about this a number of times with the glass heaters, is everybody thinks they're going to break. I've found they're a lot more durable than most people realize, right? I think people tend to think that they're real thin glass, and they're just really sensitive to, tap into the side of the tank and they're going to crack. And that's not the case, okay? They are really way more durable than you'd think. They do have, in the past at least, you have to kind of calibrate them, right, if you want that temperature on the top to be right, because it's got a little dial that you move or what have you. So that's somewhat inconvenient. They're long to get any kind of real temperature, right?
Yep.
But they're inexpensive and they work. And if you're using an Apex, right, you generally, have a lot of protection because the Apex is controlling the temperature, because they have a big control swing too, right?
Yep.
What is it, you think? Is it like 1.5 degrees
2 degrees
on the thermostat?
Yeah, 2 degrees even. Yeah.
2 degrees, yeah, each way. So you wouldn't want them to be your primary, but it'll definitely, if you set it high, be the stopgap if the Apex were to have an issue. And they're like $20 to $30 generally for the cheapo ones. Now you're talking about one that's a new one?
It's a revision of an old stalwart, the Jaeger Eheims, which the name is known, and then they just put the thermocouple controller behind it with the run dry. So it's just a revision to a known good product.
And so what makes it better? What are some of those features?
Well, the run dry is a nice thing, so it won't it won't heat up if it's detects that it's out of water. And going back to what you were saying about breaking, I had the same concern about glasses, that it would break. They're usually in with your protein skimmer, and you got to take the skimmer out to clean it. And I would thought the things would get smashed, but I found they really don't break unless you run them dry. Then they get hot, and you put them in the
cold,
cool tank water.
Yeah.
Then they break.
Then they shatter. Yeah.
Right. Then they shatter.
So this particular the E model, I guess it is, has these protections in it.
Right. Yeah, the thermocoupled ones, which is a nice revision to something that on smaller tanks I use. Bigger tanks I'm using inlines, but for most hobbyists, they're not running kind of setups that I'm building for people. So it's something that I've just gone back from. I'm leaving titanium heaters now for smaller setups that have a tube versus an inline, and going to these new Jaegers.
Right. We're talking about stuff up to maybe 800 watts or what have you, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, most people are in that range, 500 watts.
Correct. And yes, actually, on a side note, I talked to you a little bit earlier about the new BRS heaters, right, too,
Mm-hmm.
which if we're talking about heaters and I'm making a pick, I think that is one of the best new heaters to hit the market, dollar for dollar. Again, I've been burned by the titanium heater problems that have plagued them. But the element that they're using is a company out of Germany, and I think they would do a lot of service if they just put one of those on a bandsaw and cut it down the middle to show people the cross-section of how much epoxy and whatnot it has to go through in order to actually be, to get salt water in it and be inundated and have a problem with it. And then, they paired it up with an electronic controller. I think Inkbert made it, and they made some changes to it with a removable temp probe. And I think they've really put together a package that's good. There is one thing that I did mention to them that I do have a problem with, and it's that they have this 1600 watt heater package where because the thing has two plugs in it, they have two 800 watt elements that you can plug into the thing, and I'm like, guys,
how many amps does that pull?
Well, yeah, that's like 15 amps or 14 and a half amps or something. And so basically you're going to blow a circuit on some of these people who only have even 15 amp circuits on older homes or whatever it is right out of the gate, let alone they're going to plug it into their Apex, which is a 7 amp outlet, and it's just going to be bad news. So that's the one thing I think that they should not sell them that way. I don't think that's a sound idea. I think it's a more sound idea if you want that much heat, find a different way to heat your tank than two of those that are going to run simultaneously. So anyway,
I made that mistake. I put one of my inlines on the Apex, and I sent a picture to you guys. Like, is this bad?
Yeah,
it was pulling like 13 amps out of an outlet. You're like, I wouldn't recommend doing that.
Yeah, and not only that, you're the one I also had to tell too that you need to have a controller. Even on that, to have two temperature controls on your heater. Although you can plug those elements directly into your Apex, if the Apex has a problem, you now only had one control, which means no redundancy. So you save money on not having to have a controller on those things, but it's not going to serve you well. So do not buy those elements from BRS or anybody else that have a plug on them and plug them directly into your Apex. We keep talking about that. I've got Joe out here says he likes the BRS heater, for instance. And I don't know if any of you guys... actually, this question just came up, too, which is Coral Craze said... we just answered it, thank goodness, which is, would you plug it directly into the Apex without the Inkbird? And no, do not do that. Don't do that with any heater that doesn't have its own control of some sort. I don't know... Oh, here's a good question for you, Mark. On the heater, I've got it from Sir Steve Alicalotta Steel. He says, heater, vertical or horizontal placement?
That usually the manufacturer will tell you. At least with the inlines, they tell me. Otherwise, it's more about flow for me. If you have the thermostat downwind from the heater, then it's going to take the hot water, and blow it over the thermostat. Then it can.
But what about on the glass heaters? What about on the glass ones?
I haven't found a difference. You got back to they're longer, so some of the newer sumps, like the Synergy Reef System sumps, have heater holders in there that puts them horizontal.
Right.
I like to try to keep the end of the heater out of the water where possible.
That's where I was going to basically say is I know that a lot of people are using these heater holders now in sumps, And I think that's okay for, like a titanium type heater, maybe, if you can connect it without hitting the element or something, maybe. I don't know, because I don't know what it's going to do to the acrylic. But certainly on the glass ones, my opinion is because of the amount of sealant that they probably use on that, if you want it to last longer and not have an issue, keep the wire end out of the water, because nothing's going to come through the glass, and you'll never have water incursion of the salt water in through the glass. So that's the answer I would give there. Okay. So it's a heater. Kind of boring, but yeah, okay. We're glass heater
one of those
guys.
things that, like, it's not sexy, but most of us need them, and it's a big failure point.
Yeah, absolutely. 100% agree. Okay, I'll tell you what, I'm going to bring in the next one, okay? The next one, and this is the only one I'm going to bring in. I'll leave the rest to you because we both agreed on this one when you sent it over, which is the Hanna salinity tester, the dip tester, right?
Yeah.
I struggle with the refractometers a lot. I like to have something a little bit easier and readable to do, especially when I'm doing saltwater makeup. This tester from Hanna, it's got one thing that Mark and I will probably talk about, but you dip it in, you get a number, and you move on. It's got 2 carbon electrodes in there that that measure the conductivity of the water. No different than most salinity testers that run off of conductivity. It's also got a temperature probe on it, and it supposedly does temperature compensation. And it comes with 3 or 5 packets of calibration fluid with it. What's your experience there, Mark, with this thing? Do you like it?
I love them. I sent it to a lot of my clients. I recommended it to clients to buy. It's very easy to use. Just plop it in the water, you get a reading. I have found recently that it tends to fall out of calibration.
Yeah, I've noticed that too.
Okay to me, if you have to calibrate something, therefore you're constantly making it, either more accurate or more precise or both. Why is that a bad thing? And it's not that hard to calibrate it. It's a little packet, and
right.
It's easier than calibrating your Apex pH probe. Let's put it that way.
Sure, absolutely, 100%.
Which isn't very hard to begin with.
You put it in the packet, you hit the button, it does calibrate, it's done, it's calibrated, you're done. Yeah.
It'll even tell you if it's in the wrong solution, which is nice. So, I really like that. One other challenge I found with it is I told Hannah this at MACNAS, I wish it would hold the reading, because it won't hold the reading once it's out of the water. So I put it in my mixing station.
Oh,
and then
good point.
If it's low, then I can put my hand down in there, and I got to try to put my hand in and see the reading. It'd be nice if it held it for 5 seconds, but that should be an easy software fix for them.
Right, absolutely. I just think it's great. It's innovative. It takes a lot of development resources to do these kinds of things. Hanna has a little bit of a leg up here because they have some form factors of things like these dip testers and whatnot, so that they can from other industries, right? That they can use this across, because this is the part that's hard to get across to people about this industry. It's so small that the reason you see stuff and it's so hard to enter the market with some of these things is the return just isn't there. And so companies like Hanna, because they handle so many other vertical markets, are able to bring stuff to our market and bring them at a price point because they've got such a wide overall market for their products.
Yep.
Definitely.
It's an easy jump for them.
Definitely one of those. Boy, there's a lot of talk about the Reef bot out on the comments right now, my friend. We might get to that a little bit later, because I thought I actually spoke about it on the live stream a while back, so we might want to revisit that. Okay, what's up next?
Oh, well, we're looking at 2019.
Yes.
Getting my hands on a Trident, not only as a beta tester, but getting them in clients' hands has definitely been a highlight of my year. It's been, I liked the idea from the get-go, but I wanted to test it out before I gave it to clients. I gave it to clients before they purchased it. And it's been great. Last year, I totaled it up. I did over 100 flights. I was gone out, a lot installing tanks, and just to be able to look at my dashboard, my Apex dashboard, and see what's going on is great. And I was actually talking to a client today. He has one, and he was saying in his mind, it's one of the best indicators of tank health is your alkalinity. Because if things are going well, then your alkalinity drops every day, and then your dosing or whatever brings it back at night. And him and I both noticed, when we frag anything out of our tanks, then our alk immediately shoots up because it's
Mm-hmm.
like our tank shuts down. So you don't have to have a webcam on your tank, but if my alkalinity is staying stable, then I know that things are going well. And if it all of a sudden shoots up, I'm like, you know what? Something's probably going on in my tank. And when I come home, there might be some bleaching or something's going to be unhappy. But now I can just log in and I can see that and it gets tested.
How many of your clients have the Trident?
I've lost count. So I think every single one but one, and I just talked to them today, and they said absolutely that we got to do that next year.
Are any of them running the Trident controlled dosing along with the dose that I've got on the screen right here?
Some, maybe one. Most of my clients are in the 3 to 4, 5, 600 gallon range, so calcium reactors make more sense to them. So in some, I think maybe one of them is tweaking it a little bit with the alkalinity, using dosing to flatten that swing down a little bit.
Okay. So the hybrid solution, I call it, of dosing along with the calcium reactor, along with the Trident. To be honest, we talk all the time about the Trident, so I don't want to dig too far into this. I know you have to put it out there, but I like the hybrid solution because it gives you a backup when you're away from home. So if you have something happen to that calcium reactor, chances are you're like helper when you're away, especially if you have an Apex, because you tend to have less helpers. They tend to be less capable helpers generally because you don't need them when you're in Apex and you travel. They don't know how to deal with a CO2 tank and these kind of things as easily. So if you happen to run out of CO2 while you're away on vacation in a big tank with a lot of SPS, you are in trouble. And by having that two-part on standby and available, it's a huge help. But anyway, on the Trident, one of the things I thought was funny is one of the there's all the best of 2019 stuff that everybody kind of does and everything. And it was funny the other day I saw one of them, I won't mention the name, that was like, this coral and algae in a bottle stuff is definitely one of the top 10 products of 2019. Oh yeah, this bacteria in a bottle, definitely one of the top 10 products of 2019. And the Trident wasn't any part of it. And I was just like, okay, maybe I'm in an alternative universe. I kind of, I've got a ton of bias here. I know, okay, but how many people would not see, even if they just were complaining about the rollout, it as being, one of the most talked about things in 2019.
Well, it's the only aquarium product that I can think of that I've ever seen that has the honor of being flipped on eBay for sometimes 2 to 3x cost.
Yes. There has been none of those yet. It definitely has had, and they're still selling them like that, right? I mean, they're still selling them out there on eBay, not at 3x. They're selling them at maybe $800 or $900, but still, how many aquarium products 8 or 9 months into it? After, I can assure you, lots of them have been sold, are still available at that price.
An aquarium heater, let's put it that way.
Yeah, no doubt. Anyway, so thanks for the mention on that. We appreciate it, and we're working hard with that for sure. I think you had one other one out there that there were some discussion points that I wanted, right? What was that?
The Wi-Fi dongle, is that what we were talking about?
Yep.
Kessel?
Yep.
Yeah.
Kessel Wi-Fi. Tell us about it.
Well, I haven't used Kessel products on client tanks. I've used their Refusion lights. I haven't used their main lights, mainly because my clients' tanks are bigger, and to put a lot of Kessels just doesn't make sense for them. It's not that the product's bad, it just doesn't make sense. And the Wi-Fi capabilities, always seem to be lacking. Like, how long have we had Wi-Fi?
Right.
So having the dongle that fits onto it is a good step for Kessel. I think they had to do it.
Now, is this dongle, does this run Bluetooth LE or just Wi-Fi or both or what?
I think it's just Wi-Fi. I think that's how that works because it hooks into your Wi-Fi. So
that's kind of strange because it's kind of like the Bluetooth LE thing is kind of the thing right now, right?
Yeah, Kessel had to do something. Like, they had to get on to make it easier than using cords all the time to connect things to control them with their lights.
Right.
So I think that's a good move on their brand. Maybe a little late in the versus competitors type of thing. But, they're at least it's keeping them relevant to everyone else that's out there, and more choices of products leads to more competition, which I think is a good thing.
Yeah, it's the Kessels, they've sold a ton of products. I would say out of the controlled lighting department, out there for Apex users. It's the number one light that is controlled by the Apex. Would you agree?
I would think, well, more than a Radeon or an AI.
I would think in terms of number of lights controlled, it's probably more. It's certainly more than AI for sure. Absolutely more than AI, and it's probably more than Ecotech in terms of number of lights. That's my opinion. But regardless, there's a ton, right?
Right. I would think though that part of that is the interface for controlling the Kessel through the Apex is much better than per se like the Spectral controller that you used to have to use.
Correct. So this is the part that I haven't been able to put together the logic on here with Kessel, right? We'll call it thousands of Kessels sold to Apex users. They certainly know from the cables that they've sold, right? Because it takes a special cable to go to an Apex, so they know. We kind of know as well through other ways. If you go out and if you have a Kessel or any 0 to 10 light, you can go out to the schemes in Apex and see all the people who've saved their Kessel schemes. Just search for Kessel, and you'll see those are just the people who saved a scheme, right? Which is a small fraction of all the people. So we have a thing called IOTA, which is an electronic way to do stuff through the network or the Wi-Fi, right? It's been given to a number of different manufacturers, Kessel included, right? Here we've got this huge installed base. They've got a brand new light. They've got the way to interface it with the Apex, but they choose not to do it.
Seems like something's missing.
I don't know. Nobody's told me from Kessel why that's the case. But I mean, the rule of thumb, obviously for us marketers, is the easiest people to sell something to are the existing customers, right?
Existing customers.
I mean, you got a light that fits in the same form factor more or less than what they already have. They already control it with their Apex. They're not going to change it out for a new control mechanism. People aren't like that. They want something that's plug and play more or less. It's just kind of crazy for me that this has not been the case yet with the Kessel. I don't believe that the Kessel is the Kessel dongle is Bluetooth LE, which I think that's going to make it a little more difficult for people to set up compared to, say, the new stuff from Ecotech or from others who are using the Bluetooth LE methodology, which does come up much easier. A lot of people with their lights that aren't Apex people, right, are more set it and forget it, right? It's like, I come up, I want to set it up, I want that to happen like this, and you can do that with Bluetooth LE, right? This is, this is the biggest issue with Radeons, right? Is like, oh, I got to set up this other thing, or I got to plug in a cable, or I got to set up the box and to get it going, and all I want to do is set up my lights. So, yeah, I think it's a good step forward for them. They need to have this over and above, what they have. But I think they, I think they went to the 60 or 70% level on this. That's my feeling on it. Not completely with it on that one. What anybody else out there? You guys out there have anything that you thought? Here's another company too that didn't exactly step up, and they've been offered the software too to do it. Is the Orfec guys, right? Joe mentioned that Orfec needs to step up so he can control it. Let's see here. We got some questions. Is the Trident going to increase the number of tests it does? Do you feel that is a limitation versus the Reef bot? This is Sir Stevelicka Lotta Steel. What do you think? What's your feedback on that?
The question is it going to increase the amount of tests that it does?
Yes, and is that a problem competitively against the Reef bot that it doesn't?
Well, you can do a test every hour, right?
No, they're talking about the variety of tests.
What you can
that
test.
It does 3 ions, right, or the 3 measurements of calcium, alkalinity, and magnesium. They're asking, first of all, will it do other stuff? Okay, I can unequivocally say the existing Trident that you have is set up to do alkalinity, calcium, and magnesium.
Right.
That will not change in the existing Trident. As far as future products, well, that's future products, and what do I always tell you guys? Even Mark doesn't know. Okay,
I don't know.
Anything is possible, but we generally look for the things that are causing the most pain, or we can create the most amount of improvement or effect. I think we hit that really hard with the Trident and the dose together, so that's certainly not it. What do you think about this? Do you think it's a limitation versus the Reef bot, Mark? It's a valid question.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, it's in a way there's a lot to that question. There's two parts I think I can boil it down to. One is it plugs into an existing framework that people somewhat already know. If you're an Apex user, you already know how to use your Apex. It's easy to set up. The company's been around for what, 20 years?
More.
So more.
24.
24. So we're based in the United States, and not because USA is better, but there's a big user base in the United States. So we can get a hold of someone in our time zone in our side of the world. The other piece of that is, I mean, nitrates and phosphates. Once you got your tank set and it's really dialed in, you're not adding fish, you're not really changing your routine, which I'm a component of. I really like rituals, as I call them. Like, those things don't really change. They should stay pretty constant. If they do change, I mean, I've had fish die when I was out of town and my fish buddy couldn't find them, and they clearly decayed in the tank, and I didn't see any change in nitrates.
Right.
I had them do a nitrate test just to be sure. So, on one hand, more data is a good thing. On the other hand, sometimes analysis through paralysis definitely sets in. I mean, at the end of the day, I think even if I had a trident that was testing nitrates and phosphates, I would see myself hesitating to put one on, because I'm more concerned about alkalinity and calcium and magnesium. Right. That's where I'm going to be focusing my attention. I mean, there's a reason that tile is on the top of my Apex dashboard.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think my answer to this really is, first of all, you're right. You don't need to check it that frequently. And if you did check it that frequently, you would want to have something you could do about it that frequently, right? In other words,
that's a good point.
The reason the Trident is so successful is whether you're manually adjusting your dosing or you're using the Trident controlled dosing, either one, you get those numbers, every 6 hours or what have you. There is something you can do to change the direction of those numbers. Okay, this has been proven. How many years? 20 years in the reef keeping hobby. We know we dose these things, this thing goes up, or we change our calcium, this thing happens, right? Nitrate and phosphate, in terms of what you can do, in a more automated sense like that. There's some things people do, some things you can try, but there is no value there as of yet. That is solid science, right? To make a great reef, right? To increase or decrease your nitrate, for instance, right? Like I could run that everybody has. Like for instance, I use, my denitrator, my sulfur denitrator, right? So I could, I guess, change the value on that. But that whole idea of changing what you find out about is a key part of needing to test those things. So
couldn't you crank up your dose, though? If you have an automatic water change on a dose, you just up the dose to do a water change, right? I mean,
yeah, but it's so little amount that I think it would take you still to, you might as well do a manual test once a week. It'll take you a week or two to have an effect on it as well, right? I mean, if it's a manual one. Or you're going to go do a manual water change or what have you, and you're still going to manual. The only thing it buys you is the automation of the test itself to take away that pain point. And then it's about a frequency of that pain point.
Right. So then this is something that you and I have talked about. Is like there's things like this per se might pull you away from your tank. You're still going to know the data, but there's still some value of looking at your tank. When you've been in it enough, you can look at a tank and be like, something's just not right in my tank. I don't have to run a test. You should still run a test, but you just look at your tank and you just know. It's like if you come home and your spouse is a little off, you're like, something's up type of feeling. So even if we automate that, I still like once a week, for example, once a week, I do a nitrate test and I do a phosphate test because it gets me in my fish room looking at things. Right. It gets me close to the tank. I'm interacting with it. So it's keeping me in tune and in step with the tank. I think there's value there as well.
Yeah, and it's not like there's no overhead with running equipment, whether it's a Trident or anything else, in terms of testing these things. Whether it's a Trident or the Reef Bot or whatever it is, there's an overhead of running that equipment. There's a cost effectively on it, so you have to have an ROI on that for yourself, a time or whatever it is. And then you got to maintain it, got to change out the reagent, or you got to do this. And I just don't think, there's a bunch of hardcore people, and some of them are talking here, they're like, yeah, well, I totally dose 10 milliliters of nitrate daily, and I definitely would like to test and dose nitrate daily. This is such a small percentage comparatively to the market for the Trident. And it's not to say we won't have more automated testing, but I don't know when or how or what it's going to be. I don't think anybody can equivocate the value of that with the value on the Trident. and then back to other testing, things like the Reef bot. It can't even, if you want to do alkalinity, calcium, and magnesium in it anyway, it doesn't do enough tests over time, and you can't fill them all up, and there's many other things. Some of the tests seem novel, and originally I actually said, yeah, this is probably something that would not be a bad, a bad ancillary product to have for some people. Although I do know that they're starting to come up against some dilemmas with people that are out there that I know what they're doing. Guys like Derek Picker, who has been on this program before and and knows what he's doing. So anyway, it's interesting to see all of these devices and things coming out, ion probes, that are trying to come out and everything, and we'll see where all of it goes. Certainly, no doubt.
I'm definitely on the sidelines for a lot of them because, I don't have anything against people starting a new company, getting out there, trying to hustle and be entrepreneurs. I think that's great. For me, I got to think about my clients and me supporting it and how am I going to get support. It's not like I have all the answers. And is this company going to be around? I often talk about LED lights companies. They seem to pop up all the time. And then the next year or 2 years after that, they're gone. I'm like, now what?
Part of the big discussion on this, maybe people are enjoying this discussion. If you guys aren't, tell us that you're not enjoying this part of the discussion. Tell us what we should talk about. But again, it goes back to how big the market really is and how hard it is to build a great product. And then once somebody builds it, how much sales they actually get when they try to go into a market. It's really, really difficult to penetrate the market and to get sustainable sales on a lot of these different products. It just is. The market is not that big. Trust me, it is not that big.
It's not, especially the saltwater aquarium market and then the reef market at that.
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, when you start looking at who's going to actually pay for, let's say, a $900 product that tells you 10 different parameters, how many of them can you possibly sell in a market? The estimates some people have are in, well over $10,000 that some people think that people spend on a saltwater aquarium on average. No way. It's nowhere close to that amount. So the return is it's not there. What would you say the average saltwater reef keeper, bring out of it the commercial stuff, right, all together, right?
Yep.
But just the home hobbyist, right, saltwater home hobbyist, you can throw in there, whether it's only reef or however you want to slice it, what do you think they spend first year on average?
$2,000.
Yeah, that's what I'd say. $1,500 to $2,000 is what I would say. And it's really hard if you're trying to just grab a piece of that $2,000 or call it $3,000, right? And you get to take a fraction of the overall market and a fraction of that $3,000 and have to support the company. And there's, I don't know, 500,000 people like that, maybe?
Maybe.
Yeah. It's tough.
Maybe. And even then, you're not reaching them all.
Yeah. Yeah,
for sure. It goes back to how many people are on forums, how many people come to a reef trade show versus how many people have a reef tank. It's small.
Right. For sure.
It should be higher, but it's small.
Well, let's see here. I want some questions here, guys, so give me some good questions. We've got a big audience right now. We've got 170 people in the live stream here, so somebody's got to have some real good questions for Mark or myself. I think I saw... here's just a funny comment, right? Somebody, Drama D said he thought it was $5,000 to $6,000. I know people spend that. I don't think that's the average Drama D. But Rosano said, "Let me lower this before my wife hears the answer." That's pretty funny.
Yeah, that's. I have to. We're adding on to the house, Terrence, so I can upgrade my tank. And I got my general contractor. He was starting into the hobby, and now that he's gotten his feet wet, he's had some success. Now he's going all into it. So I'm like, then he wants to buy this and he wants to buy that. I'm like, you need to get a better skimmer. You need to get, a controller for this. And he's like, well, I'm just testing it out. I'm like, look, if it can help you to avoid a disaster or you have a skimmer that actually works, you're going to have a better experience. Like, you're going to end up with anyway. Buy it now.
Well, we've got one comment here that says, can you please move on and talk about your other favorite products from Dharma Bum? Out on YouTube. I'm not going to talk about a product right now, but I am going to talk about, and I'm going to ask Mark a question around this. So, the question is, what was, one of the biggest, successes you had on your reef tank this year? Okay, And my answer to that is something that surprised me completely. I'm not a person that adds things into my tank just willy-nilly, like, oh yeah, try this thing out, this does this, and try this thing out and pour this juice in or do that. So, and I've talked about this before on this program, I had some of the dreaded algae, right? You name them, but specifically the Bryopsis algae. And,
we talked about that.
Yeah, and I had been pulling it out, here and there for probably a year and a half in little spots, and it just got ahead of it. My corals got so big that there's no way I could get in there to get at it, and it was a problem. And my biggest thing of success for 2019 on my reef tank is using flucosanol on my tank and seeing the results on that, and also some other hair algae that I had. I won't say it takes out all hair algae, but whatever other kind of gross grow under the kind of dark green and gooey stuff on the bottom side of rocks that kind of moves out kind of stuff, that kind of hair algae, took both of those out of the tank within 10 days. I showed the progression on here, and I was blown away, and didn't have any side effects because I thought for sure I was going to have some sort of a side effect from this stuff.
You called me about it. You were concerned.
Oh, it was a big deal because I was so upset about all the algae, and I'm like, I don't like sticking things in my tank because what else is it going to kill that I don't know about? What else is super special in my tank that makes my tank that nice, right? But I don't know. And so that, for me, was the biggest success so far in 2019. What about you? With your reef tank, your personal reef tank?
Yeah, so not much changes on my tank. I don't get to, everyone kind of thinks that you get to stay home and, play Coral Geek all the time, kind of thing. And it's, I don't, and I often am behind the curve in a sense on evaluating new things. So the biggest thing for me was collecting corals from the Great Barrier Reef, getting them home and having them not change colors, doing any kind of color changing from a wild caught type of thing. So that's been fun to see, having something that you collected yourself, sustain it.
Right. That's a really cool thing.
Home, not only just to say that I did it, but to see it grow. And I need to get some of that coral to you because I'm tearing down my tank to upgrade.
Oh.
And I need to build some insurance on that.
Okay. So you got some good stuff there?
Yeah. I got some macros. I have one I call Aussie Gold, which actually grows quite fast and a unique growth pattern. So I need to send that to you in case, as things go south. When I used to do books, I wrote a book about moving and upgrading your tank. And one of the biggest things that I talked about in there, which I tell all my clients, I'm here in DC, a client who is upgrading his tank. Mm-hmm. He has a bunch of corals in it, is that you need to take pieces out and put them in other tanks. Don't, put some in your frag tank that's not tied to your system. Give it to your buddies. My tank, I'm shipping them to clients across the country because when you move things on your tank, corals get upset. Mm-hmm. It's likely you're going to have some bleaching. Wouldn't be surprised if you lose some stuff. So Give yourself some insurance. Ship some frags out. I'll ship you some big frags. They'll grow out. If things go south, I can get frags back from you. If it doesn't, hey, that's great. But you might as well give yourself the back it up because I know people have some collector pieces or some neat things they found.
Yeah, I have some in my tank that I've absolutely shared. I have this one kind of hybrid stag. I don't know if I showed it to you or not. That's growing with the green proteins inside the purple stag that I have, and I took a frag of that and gave it to Mark at Tenji out here. And said, here, grow this in your tank. I don't know what's going to happen in mine, but if something happens to mine, this is too special of something. So I do have some questions here. Okay, let's see here. Terrence, here we go. So Matt Dudley asks me, Terrence, what is your favorite non-Apex related item? Okay, I will talk about on my tank. Let's see. I would say, God, it's such a toss-up. Wow. I can't do one. I'm going to do two. Okay. Number one is the lighting on my tank is at this point the best lighting in the industry. It is the Coral Care light from Philips. It has a number of shortcomings, but they're not the light quality that comes out of it. The shortcomings are controllability, maybe, and specifically the form factor. It's just huge and heavy. They've come out with a new one that
the brick.
Yeah, they're huge. The new ones that they've got coming out, the version 3, they're nicer, but they're still a big brick. They're still, in my opinion, they're still ugly. They've got to be in a canopy. They can't be hung over a regular tank. But the light that comes off of them is just medicine for corals, man. It is just, the corals absolutely eat it up. There is no shadowing. The spectrum is spot on. The stuff grows like crazy. It is one of the secret sauces to my tank, no doubt. And it has to do with the pattern of the lights over the tank. It isn't a sun pattern like lights, that we know of, that just come out like the sun. It is the sky. And that's really the difference. It's a panel of lights that just aren't a bunch of individual lights, but they actually glow the whole panel. So you get this soft glow, and you don't get any of the sparkly stuff that you get with a lot of the lights that have the discrete LEDs. And so it's a home run, that particular light. And I have the first version of it. I don't even have the version 2, or they call the one now version 2, but it's really version 3. But I don't have, I have the first version of it, and I love that. The second thing, to answer the question of what's the one non-Apex product that I love, is my sulfur denitrator on my tank. It's one of these products that, if in the wrong hands, it can be super bad for your tank. But I monitor it with the Apex, and I control the flow to it with my dose. And with those two things together, and monitoring the ORP in it, it allows me to have a lot of nutrients in my tank, and pulls out a lot of the nitrate while the phosphate gets pulled out of in my refugium. So yeah, those are the two things. What about you? Do you have one on your tank that is the one thing, non-Apex, that you just are like in love with, that you couldn't do without?
I mean, my tank, I try to keep things super simple. So there's, I have my Apex on it, and I have my Ecotech lights and my Ecotech pumps and a return pump. I mean, I should say, I think I added the inline heater this year. I lose track of time with these things. I've been really happy with the Aqualogic inline heaters. They make them down to 0.5 kilowatt, which is pretty typical for a lot of tanks out there. I mean, it's a bigger thing. You got to mount it to the wall. It takes up about 15 inches.
Right.
Their own flow sensor. So if flow stops, the heater kicks off. I come out of the UK, and I've been very, very happy with them. Have yet to have any issues with them whatsoever. So that's something that's given me a lot of peace of mind after having a titanium tube fail and almost take out my tank.
Yeah. Okay. Another question. Here's one for you, because I don't do this, okay? And people probably think I'm crazy. How do you feel about using Bayer dip for quarantine as a new hobbyist about to start a quarantine tank? What other ways do you recommend? I will say, first and foremost, Bayer dip is not go in your quarantine tank, okay? It is a dip that you use temporarily, okay? It is not something you put in a quarantine tank. But I'll let Mark answer the question of what does he think about using Bayer dip for corals.
So I used to use it, and I stopped because I saw pests walk through the dip. And one of the bigger reasons I stopped was from an environmental standpoint. Like I had the dip, and then all I can do with it is dump it in the yard, which I don't think is a good idea.
Right.
Or dump it down my municipal water supply, which I don't feel like is a good idea either. So I'm like, what do I do with this toxic substance? I mean, how can I responsibly dispose of it? And I didn't have a good answer, and it didn't seem as effective as everyone had hoped. So I'm like, it's not, for our cost on it wasn't worth it to me.
Yeah, and besides, so maybe your great-grandchildren will have 7 fingers or something, right?
Well, we're from Tennessee, so we marry our sisters, so...
You already have that problem? Easy now. We don't want to upset any of our control freaks out there in Tennessee, okay?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of Californians moving to Tennessee, Terrence, so it's... Here's
a good question for you, because we're out of the product things now, and I think you guys are probably like this question. I recently jumped into the roller mat filters, and I'm super impressed by their performance over filter socks. So I've never run a roller mat. I don't run filter socks right now, but a lot of that has to do with how my system runs. I have 28 square feet of bottom surface in my sump, and my return is 7 feet away from, the drain that's coming in. So I get the ability to have stuff settle out and suck it out during a water change more than other people. What's your thought on the roller mats? I think they look like cool things, and I've thought about using one for some time, but I've never put one into play.
So I've tried some. I was very hopeful for them. I wish that they would work. They were a miserable failure. So the built-in ones seem to have more promise, but then it's built in. You're committed to it. They're big. I really haven't seen one that would really work well from a usability standpoint that fits under a tank.
I've heard some of them advance too fast, right? So you use up a lot of the stuff way too fast based around the way they work. And I know some of them, like Royal Exclusive, have put other methodologies in there so that they don't advance so fast, right? They advance halfway instead of all the way to clear it out and whatnot. I also hear that there's smell issues with some of them that don't have lids and whatnot over them. So if you're in your living room, that can be a problem.
My client here is wanting me to try a new one, so I'm going to test it out. It seems to have lots of promise, but he's willing to kind of fiddle with it with me. It was his idea, and I said, all right, it seems legit enough that I'll try it. So maybe that will break the mold because it's set up a little differently. But, it hasn't been delivered yet, so the company's got to do that first before I can even think about trying it.
Sometimes I disagree with some of our people who leave comments, so this is one of those that I will disagree with a little bit, which George Kyriakidis, who was on our program here recently, says, no socks and no sponges needed if you've got an efficient skimmer, in my opinion. I don't agree with that personally because I think in a smaller system, you're still going to have a lot of material that's going to get caught up in the loop and never come out and out of the skimmer. I just think, in my case, like I said, it settles out, 3-4 feet away from the drain and the stuff, and I have a good skimmer too, but there's still a lot of stuff that I pull out of that tank, and I've got a really good skimmer, and especially when I move the rock stack in my sump, because I have a huge rock pile in my sump, I move that, I'm astounded that there's like a half to 3/4 of an inch of sediment under that thing that I have to suck out of there. So I'm going to disagree with him on this one. Everybody's tank is different, so there you go. Let's see here. What do we've got? Another question. Heat exchanger. Oh, that was another thing that was... then I'm going to transition to one other thing before we close this out, Mark. You've been a great champ here on this. Adam Moore says, I heat my tank with a heat exchanger off my water heater. I can share my setup with you if I like. Very efficient. This is Sean Clark. I just got done doing this. I used one. So this is where maybe I'll get into this later in another episode. But I bought a titanium one off of eBay that had high ratings, and everybody said it was great. Titanium heat exchanger, right? Had Brian Lincoln come over and help me out in my place and install it. Got it working. It's awesome. It's the greatest thing ever. The heat exchanger, because I have circulating hot water already in my house. Electricity is 1.5 times as much per BTU as gas in our area. And so my gas water heater heats the water in there. I went downstairs a week and a half later, and out of the pipe I see little micro bubbles, and out of the micro bubbles I'm like, how can micro bubbles be coming out of here? It's got to be sucking air from somewhere. I put back pressure on the pipe, and water comes out of the seams on the heat exchanger.
Oh,
so
boy.
I'm like, this is no good. So then I went and said, well, the original way I was going to do this before I thought I was just going to spend money and have the cool solution was the PEX loop, which is 100 feet of PEX tube. You basically put it and hook it up with the automatic valve, just like I had the other thing, and I exchanged the heat exchanger by putting a PEX loop in, because I have a huge sump, so
I've seen it. It's
I
big.
can put a 2.5 foot loop of PEX tube in there, and it is amazing. So that is the other thing from 2019 that has been really good after starting out really bad.
But Terrence, your sump is so big you could bury someone in it, and they would disappear, and no one would ever know.
I call it Howard Taft's bathtub, but nobody gets the joke. So
I don't get it. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. Nobody that's into history gets that one. Howard Taft was known only because I was a big. Nobody cares about this. The Guinness Book of World Records guy, and the fattest president ever was Howard Taft in the Guinness Book of World Records. They have it.
Yeah, the president. Yep.
And he was stuck. And he was buried in a coffin the size of a piano case or something like that. It was in the book, so that's how big. It's 7 by 4 foot or something. Anyway. Last question I'm going to ask of you, okay? What was the biggest product fail of 2019 for you that you saw? You're going everywhere. You're seeing all of these different products, all the hype, all of this stuff happening. I'm not trying to, to send hate anywhere, but look, we talk about the good stuff. We got to talk about something that was an absolute fail. On the spot.
So I don't know if the products came out in 2019, but I will say that every drop-in roller mat product I tried in 2019 was a disaster for me. I wanted that to work so bad, but they didn't. So that was an upset for me. I think the per se the biggest failure that was a very public failure was the Mindstream. Monitor. I mean, that went down. Like, people really thought that was going to work. I don't know how many of those I saw given away. The certificate was given away at frag swaps. Some people are like, this is the apex killer. I don't believe that because it was a different product, but
it's a different product. And without getting into the details of the Mindstream thing in general, I think this is a more general thing, and you probably have a good discussion about this. We'll close on this. As far as new products in the hobby and new things that you see, everything looks great and shiny. And it's going to solve the world's problem. It's going to be the car that gets 200 miles to the gallon, or the electric car that gets 600 miles on a charge, or whatever it happens to be. And often they come out with these, Kickstarters and other things to try to get them going. And everybody wants it to work. And please, people, just in general, be very, 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 very careful where you put your money. It's a very small market that we have here. It's very hard to develop products. And it's super high risk. Any of these kinds of endeavors are incredible high risk.
And it can go well or it can not go well. And I think if you just understand what you're getting into,
Name one that went well in this industry.
Well, I mean, what Kickstarter? Okay, so the Acroporidium flatworm project, which isn't a product. It's not apples to apples here, but that was a product that I'm proud of, that I helped got them funding a couple years ago. Now there's a guy doing his PhD partly with that project. So that's been a lot of success. Now, it's not a product, but that is the only per se Kickstarter that I know of. And I'll turn this around on you, Terrence. If this was Neptune Systems was just getting started now, let's say you guys just had the idea you're going to make an aquarium controller, would you go to Kickstarter to try to round up funding and engage interest?
Oh, I very much would say yes, probably would try. And I would still, if I wasn't in that company on the other side and we weren't even in this company, I would tell people, because I look at all the Kickstarters for lots of products in lots of industries, and the only ones I think that seem to really work are e-bikes, right? I mean, there's just like, so I really think that it's super, super difficult. The more complex it is, the more you want to stay out of it, in my opinion, for this particular market. If somebody's coming to market with, let's go to acro-eating flatworms. Let's just say, as a hypothetical, somebody came out with an in-the-tank acro-eating flatworm juice that didn't hurt anything else, and they've got it, and it's proven, but they've got to come to market with it, and they need $15,000 to come to market for it, and they want $20 out of you, I'd say, yeah, cool, go for it. Why not? Sure. Fund this company. Give them $20. What are you out if it doesn't work out? But if you're forking over $500 or $400 or $900 for a device that requires a lot of engineering and other things, I'd say steer clear.
It's a big risk.
Yeah. And even products that aren't Kickstarter, that are newer products that come out that are the tech products, it's really hard to do. It really is.
Especially from a new company. With a new company that doesn't have anything behind them, it's tough.
So anyway, let's see here. I don't think we have any more comments here. The only other question is, you guys are always asking about, why can't I get more Tridents, and even now they're selling out everywhere. It's getting better. The demand is slowing a little bit for them, so it should be a little bit easier to get them. Reagents are back in stock pretty much ongoing. You'll see them come in stock, go away. It's effect of people going, oh, I need to get it now, and I'll get two. Well, be careful. Do not stock up on them. They do have a shelf life. So you don't want to go out and try to buy, if somebody does sell you 3 6-month kits, because you're going to be unhappy in a year. So anyway, we're doing our best to get all this stuff out to you guys, and have great Let's Talk Reefs. We got Mark here. Thank you, Mark, for joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thank you to the nearly 200 people that joined us here. We will be back in 2 weeks, hopefully with another great announcement. I've got something cooking that I want to tell you guys about 2 weeks from now, with hopefully a good guest. Can't say anything about it yet, and we'll see how that goes. Next week we'll try to get somebody on for Control Freak Wednesday, but until then, thanks, Mark, for joining us. See you soon, maybe somewhere this come 2020.
Yeah, I don't know where I'm going. I know I'm building 6 tanks already this year before June, and none of them are under 800 gallons, so it's busy.
Okay. All right, man. Well, take it easy and have fun with that tank out there.
All right, we'll do it. Thanks, Terrence.
Catch you later.